It is the morning of January 17th, 1893. In the royal palace in Honolulu, Iolani Palace, a building completed just 11 years earlier, fitted with electric lights and a telephone system before the White House had either, a woman sits alone in a formal room and considers her options. Outside, on the streets of the capital, United States Marines are positioned at strategic points around the government buildings. They arrived yesterday, called in not by the Hawaiian government, not by any legitimate authority, but by the American diplomatic minister, a man named John Stevens, who had decided on his own initiative that the time had come. Inside the palace, Queen Liliuokalani, the sovereign monarch of the Kingdom of Hawaii, a nation recognized by the major powers of the world, with its own flag, its own constitution, its own treaties, understands what is happening. A group of American sugar planters and businessmen have declared a provisional government. They control, with the Marines nearby, the physical reality of the situation. Her own forces are outnumbered and outgunned. She has two choices. She can fight, and her people will die in a conflict they cannot win. Or she can yield under protest to the superior force of the United States of America and trust that the government in Washington, when it learns what has been done here in its name, will correct the injustice. She yields. She will spend the rest of her life waiting for the correction that never comes. Hawaii is the 50th state of the United States of America. It has been a state since 1959. It was a territory before that, from 1898. Before 1898, it was an independent sovereign nation, a constitutional monarchy with a royal family, a legislature, a diplomatic corps, and formal recognition from the United States, Britain, France, Japan, and the major powers of the world. It did not become American because its people chose to become American. It became American because a small group of sugar planters needed a tax break, hired lawyers to write a constitution that stripped native Hawaiians of their voting rights, and when that was not enough, called in the United States military to remove the Queen from her throne. The President of the United States at the time called it an act of war, a dishonorable act carried out by American citizens against a friendly nation. He demanded that the Queen be restored to her throne. Congress refused. The sugar planters kept their tax break. The Queen died in her palace under house arrest, and the Kingdom of Hawaii ceased to exist. The United States government issued a formal apology 100 years later. The apology changed nothing. The Kingdom of Hawaii had not always been vulnerable. In the early 19th century, King Kamehameha I had unified the Hawaiian Islands through a combination of military conquest and political diplomacy, creating a centralized monarchy that was, by the standards of the Pacific, a sophisticated and stable state. His successors had navigated the competing pressures of American, British, French, and Russian commercial and strategic interest with considerable skill, signing treaties, managing trade relationships, and maintaining the essential fact of Hawaiian sovereignty through decades of increasing foreign engagement. By the middle of the 19th century, Hawaii had a written constitution, an elected legislature, a Supreme Court, a postal system, and a public education system. It had abolished the feudal land system and established individual property rights. It had signed reciprocity treaties with the United States that allowed Hawaiian sugar to enter American markets at preferential rates, creating the economic foundation for the sugar industry that would eventually consume the kingdom. The sugar industry transformed Hawaii. American and European planters had recognized that the volcanic soil and tropical climate of the Hawaiian Islands were ideal for sugar cultivation. By the mid-19th century, large plantations had been established across several islands, worked first by native Hawaiian labor, and then, as the native population collapsed under the impact of introduced disease, by imported contract workers from China, Japan, Portugal, and the Philippines. The planters grew wealthy, they grew politically connected, they grew impatient. The Reciprocity Treaty of 1875 had given Hawaiian sugar duty-free access to the American market. When the McKinley Tariff of 1890 eliminated the preferential treatment that had previously benefited Hawaiian sugar, the planters faced a stark economic reality. Duty-free access to the American market required being part of America. The path to annexation ran through the throne. King Kalakaua, who had reigned since 1874, had been maneuvered in 1887 into signing what Hawaiians called the Bayonet Constitution, a document produced under threat of force by a group of American and European businessmen that stripped the king of most of his executive powers and changed voting requirements in ways that effectively disenfranchised most native Hawaiians and Asian residents while giving voting rights to wealthy foreign residents who did not hold Hawaiian citizenship. Kalakaua died in 1891. His sister, Liliuokalani, ascended the throne. She immediately made clear that she intended to restore the rights the Bayonet Constitution had stripped from her people. She was drafting a new constitution when the planters moved against her. They had been planning it for months. The Committee of Safety was formed in January 1893 by a group of 13 men, most of them American citizens or of American descent, most of them directly involved in the sugar industry. Their actual purpose was to overthrow the Hawaiian monarchy and seek annexation by the United States. They had a crucial ally in John Stevens, the American minister to Hawaii. Stevens was a man of strong annexationist convictions who had spent years arguing that Hawaii's absorption into the United States was both inevitable and desirable. On January 16th, Stevens requested the landing of troops from the USS Boston, an American naval vessel anchored in Honolulu Harbor. 162 armed American sailors and Marines came ashore. They positioned themselves at the government building, the palace grounds, and other strategic locations across the capital. They did not intervene directly in Hawaiian affairs. They simply stood there, armed, in uniform, a visible demonstration of where American military force would be applied if the situation required it. The following day, January 17th, the Committee of Safety declared a provisional government and proclaimed the monarchy abolished. Liliuokalani was in the palace when the declaration was made. Her cabinet advised her that resistance was impossible, that the presence of the American troops made any military response futile and would only result in unnecessary deaths. She issued a statement of protest addressed explicitly to the government of the United States and yielded her authority. Her statement read, in part, "I yield to the superior force of the United States of America, whose minister plenipotentiary has caused United States troops to be landed at Honolulu, and declared that he would support the said provisional government. Now, to avoid any collision of armed forces and perhaps loss of life, I do under this protest, and impelled by said force, yield my authority until such time as the government of the United States shall, upon the facts being presented to it, undo the action of its representative, and reinstate me in the authority which I claim as the constitutional sovereign of the Hawaiian Islands. She was not conceding defeat. She was filing a complaint. John Stevens recognized the provisional government the same day. He raised the American flag over the government building. He sent a telegram to Washington announcing that the Hawaiian pear is now fully ripe, and this is the golden hour for the United States to pluck it. Grover Cleveland was inaugurated as President of the United States on March 4, 1893, 6 weeks after the overthrow. He withdrew the annexation treaty from the Senate and ordered an investigation. The investigator he appointed, former Congressman James Blount, spent 4 months in Hawaii interviewing witnesses and examining documents. His report was unambiguous. Blount concluded that the presence of American troops had been the decisive factor in the overthrow, that without the Marines on the streets of Honolulu, the Committee of Safety could not have succeeded, and that the American minister had acted improperly. The overthrow, Blount concluded, had been carried out with the active assistance of the United States government, in violation of international law. Cleveland sent a message to Congress in December 1893, stating directly that the overthrow of the Hawaiian monarchy had been an act of war against a peaceful and friendly nation. He stated that the United States had a moral obligation to restore the Queen to her throne. He asked Congress to authorize the restoration. Congress refused. The provisional government reorganized itself as the Republic of Hawaii. Cleveland left office in 1897 without having restored the Queen. His successor, William McKinley, was an expansionist who saw Hawaii's strategic location in the Pacific as essential to American naval power. When the Spanish-American War of 1898 demonstrated the military value of a mid-Pacific base, the political momentum for annexation became irresistible. Congress passed a joint resolution of annexation in July 1898. On August 12, 1898, the American flag was raised over Liliuokalani Palace. The Hawaiian flag was lowered. Members of the Hawaiian royal household who witnessed the ceremony wept openly. Liliuokalani was in the palace. She did not attend the ceremony. She had spent the previous year under house arrest, charged with treason by the Republic of Hawaii, after a royalist attempt to restore her throne had been discovered and suppressed. She had been tried, convicted, and sentenced before receiving a pardon. She lived until 1917. She spent her remaining years writing her memoirs, composing music. She was a gifted composer whose songs are still performed in Hawaii today, and pursuing, through legal channels that never succeeded, the return of crown lands that had been seized in the overthrow. She never recovered her throne. She never stopped trying. On November 23, 1993, President Bill Clinton signed Public Law 103-150, a joint resolution of the United States Congress that formally apologized to Native Hawaiians for the illegal overthrow of the Kingdom of Hawaii. The resolution acknowledged that the overthrow had been carried out with the active participation of agents and citizens of the United States. It acknowledged that the native Hawaiian people had never directly relinquished their claims to their inherent sovereignty as a people over their national lands. It changed nothing on the ground. Hawaii remained the 50th state. The Crown lands remained under the control of the state government. The Native Hawaiian sovereignty movement received a formal acknowledgement of its historical grievance and no material remedy for it. The apology resolution was calibrated to acknowledge the maximum amount of historical wrongdoing while committing to the minimum possible consequence. It said, "You were wronged." It did not say, "Here is what we will do about it." The sovereignty movement continues. There are Hawaiians today who do not recognize the authority of the state or federal government over the islands, who fly the flag of the Kingdom of Hawaii alongside or instead of the American flag, who argue that the legal foundation of American authority over Hawaii is as illegitimate today as it was on August 12, 1898. The sugar industry that drove the overthrow is gone. The last sugar plantation in Hawaii closed in 2016, 123 years after the overthrow that was staged at its economic core to protect its access to the American market. The fields are now fallow or converted to other uses, or simply overgrown. The military bases remain. Pearl Harbor, the naval station whose strategic value was among the factors that made Hawaii's annexation irresistible to American expansionists in the 1890s, remains one of the most important American military installations in the Pacific. The strategic logic that the planters used to sell annexation to a skeptical American public has outlasted the economic logic by more than a century. Liliuokalani's palace still stands in downtown Honolulu. Ailani Palace is now a museum. You can tour the throne room where the Queen received foreign dignitaries. You can see the room where she was held under house arrest. You can read the words of the statement she issued on January 17, 1893, yielding her authority under protest to the superior force of the United States of America. She was right about what had happened. She was right that it was wrong. She was right that the United States government, when presented with the facts, would have an obligation to act. She was wrong about what that obligation would produce. 100 years later, it produced a resolution. The island stayed.